Ash. Ash floated through the air like gray snow. It drifted slowly, gently, as if the station itself were breathing it out. The particles glowed faintly in the emergency lights, turning the narrow corridor into a silent storm. Lieutenant Mara Hale pressed her back against the wall, her chest tight, her hands shaking. She didn't know where the ash was coming from. She didn't know where she was. She only knew one thing: everywhere the ash touched, something felt wrong. Her boots crunched as she took a step forward. The sound made her flinch. She looked down. The floor was covered in it. Ash. Thick enough to leave footprints. Mara followed the trail with slow steps until it ended at an open hatch. Beyond it was the command bay. The heart of the station. The place that should have been safe. Inside, bodies floated gently, held in place by broken gravity clamps. Crew members. Her crew. Their eyes were closed, faces calm, like they were asleep. Mara's stomach twisted. "No," she whispered. Her voice sounded strange in her ears, like it didn't belong to her. "No, no, no." She pushed off the wall and drifted into the room. Her hand brushed against one of the bodies, and a puff of ash lifted from the suit, swirling around her glove. The ash was warm. Her head throbbed. A sharp pain shot behind her eyes, and suddenly the room tilted. The ash around her began to move, not drifting anymore, turning, circling her like it knew her. A warning flashed on the main screen. Atmosphere failure, ash contamination detected. "What does that mean?" Mara said, panic rising. She grabbed the edge of a console to steady herself. That was when the reflection caught her eye. In the dark screen, behind her, she saw herself. But she was covered in ash. Not just dusted, coated, like she had burned and come back wrong. Ash filled her mouth in the reflection. Her eyes were black. The reflection smiled. Mara spun around, gasping. Nothing was there. The ash fell still. Then a voice crackled through the station speakers, soft and broken, like it had traveled a long way to reach her. "Mara, you woke up too early." The lights went out. And somewhere deep in the station, something shifted, sending a new cloud of ash rushing through the vents. That was the moment she screamed. But the story didn't begin there. It began with quiet. Days earlier, maybe weeks, she wasn't sure, Mara had been part of a small research crew sent to Station Eos, orbiting a distant planet the color of rust. The mission was simple on paper: study the planet's surface, collect samples, test long-term isolation systems. She remembered laughing during launch. Remembered coffee floating out of her cup. Remembered thinking the stars looked closer than usual. Then the memories became thin, like pages torn from a book. She remembered heat alarms going off. A strange dust storm on the planet below, darker than expected. Ash rising into the sky, even though there were no fires. "That's not ash," someone had said. "There's no oxygen." But the dust behaved like ash. It stuck to suits. It clogged filters. It slipped into the station when the airlocks cycled. The crew argued about it. Some wanted to abort. Others wanted more data. Mara couldn't remember which side she was on. She only remembered feeling tired. So tired. Back in the present, the emergency lights flickered back on. The station hummed weakly, like a dying animal. Mara forced herself to breathe slowly, one breath at a time. "Okay," she said aloud, trying to sound calm. "You're alive. You're thinking. That's good." She checked her suit display. Heart rate high. Oxygen low. Ash particles detected inside the station, and inside her suit. Inside. Her hand moved to her chest, and she felt it then. A dull ache. Like something heavy sitting just under her ribs. She stumbled into the medical bay and activated the scanner. The screen blinked, struggled, then showed an image that made her knees buckle. Her lungs were dark. Not injured. Not collapsed. Filled. Fine gray shapes moved slowly inside her chest, drifting with each breath. "Ash. This isn't possible," she whispered. "I'd be dead." The scanner beeped once and shut itself off. Behind her, The ash on the floor began to gather, pulling together into a thin line that pointed back toward the command bay. The speakers crackled again. "You're carrying us now," the voice said gently. "Just like the others did." Mara backed away, her mind racing. "Who are you?" There was a pause. Then the answer came, calm and certain. "We are what you brought back." The station shuddered. A new alarm began to sound, deeper, slower, more urgent. Re-entry sequence initiated. Mara stared at the warning, her breath catching. The station was preparing to fall toward the planet. And the ash inside her chest began to warm. The station began to shake. Mara grabbed the edge of the medical bed as the floor vibrated beneath her boots. Red lights flashed along the walls. The warning siren rose and fell, slow and heavy, like a giant breathing in pain. "Abort re-entry," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Station EOS, abort re-entry now." The station did not answer. The ash inside her chest pulsed. Warm. Almost comforting. Mara staggered into the corridor, following the glowing arrows toward the command bay. The ash on the floor lifted with each tremor, swirling around her ankles like it was happy to move again. She coughed, and a gray puff escaped her mouth. She froze. She wiped her lips with the back of her glove. When she pulled her hand away, it was dusted with fine gray ash. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." As she floated into the command bay, the bodies of her crew were gone. The clamps were empty. The room was clean. Too clean. The main screen flickered to life, showing a replay log. Video footage from days ago. The crew stood together, helmets off, faces tired and scared. Mara watched herself on the screen, speaking to the others. "We can't leave yet," Past Mara said. "The ash is reacting to us. It's changing." "What if it's alive?" another crew member asked. Past Mara looked at the camera. Her eyes were sharp. Determined. "Then it's learning," she said. "And we're the only ones who can understand it." The video cut to static. Mara's head throbbed. Memories slammed into her like broken glass. Experiments. Breathing tests. Crew members coughing, then collapsing. Someone screaming as ash poured from their mouth. Someone else begging her to stop. "I didn't mean to," Mara said aloud, tears floating from her eyes in tiny spheres. "I was trying to help." The voice returned, no longer cold. Almost kind. "You did help," it said. "You taught us what it means to survive." The station shook harder. Gravity surged on and off, throwing Mara against the wall. Pain exploded in her chest as the ash inside her shifted, spreading like roots. She gasped and slid down to the floor. "What do you want?" she cried. "To go home," the voice answered. The main screen changed, showing the planet below. Its surface glowed faintly, covered in massive dark storms, ash storms, rolling endlessly across the land. "We were trapped there," the voice continued. "Buried. Scattered. Alone. You gave us shape. You gave us memory." Mara realized the truth then. The ash was not killing the crew. It was replacing them. Her crewmates hadn't died from failure or fire. They had breathed the ash in, and become part of it. Their bodies were only shells now, broken and empty, discarded once the ash learned enough. She was the last one left. The strongest. The only one still fighting it. "Let me go," Mara whispered. "Please." The ash inside her chest tightened, pressing against her ribs. She felt hands, gentle, steady, holding her from the inside. "We can't," the voice said softly. "You're already carrying us." The re-entry countdown reached its final minute. Mara dragged herself into the pilot's seat, her vision blurring. With shaking hands, she overrode the auto-sequence. A single option blinked on the screen. Manual ejection, escape pod available. One seat. One chance. The ash inside her reacted instantly, burning hotter, spreading faster. "If you leave," the voice warned, no longer gentle, "we die." Mara closed her eyes. She thought of Earth. Of rain that wasn't ash. Of air that didn't hurt to breathe. Of being alone, but truly alive. "I'm sorry," she whispered. With a scream, she slammed her hand down. The escape pod blasted free just as Station EOS tore itself apart in a storm of fire and dust. Mara was thrown back into the seat, the world spinning as the pod rocketed away. Inside her chest, the ash screamed. Then, silence. Hours later, the pod drifted in space, systems barely alive. Mara coughed. A final cloud of ash poured from her mouth, floating in front of her like a dying breath. It twisted once, then fell apart into nothing. Mara sobbed, alone. Rescue found her days later. They said she was lucky, the only survivor. But weeks after returning to Earth, as Mara lay in a hospital bed, she noticed something strange. Every time she exhaled, a faint gray dust settled on the sheets. And far away, on a dead planet covered in endless storms of ash, something new began to remember her name. Months passed. Doctors ran every test they could think of. Scans, blood work, lung biopsies. Everything came back almost normal. Almost. There was always something they couldn't explain, tiny gray particles that didn't behave like dust, didn't break down, didn't disappear. They called it residue from space exposure. Mara called it something else. At night, when the hospital room was quiet, she could feel it again. Not pain. Not heat. Just a presence. Like standing in a room where someone had just left. She stopped coughing ash after a while. The doctors celebrated. They said she was healing. But sometimes, when she breathed out slowly, the air in front of her would shimmer. Just for a second. Like warm air above a fire. She knew then that the ash was not gone. It was waiting. Years later, Mara stood alone in the desert, watching the wind lift fine gray dust from the ground. Wildfires burned far away, turning forests into smoke and sky into shadow. Ash fell softly around her, sticking to her boots. For a moment, the wind changed. The dust swirled, not randomly, but together. She felt it recognize her. Mara closed her eyes and whispered, "I won't open the door again." The wind slowed. The ash settled. Somewhere far beyond the stars, on a planet that never truly died, storms continued to move like thoughts across the surface, slow, patient, remembering. And inside one human body on Earth, a small part of that world still breathed. Not enough to speak. Not enough to escape. But enough to wait. The end.